"You drool at dinner, Grandma. Wear this," he said, holding out a blue adult bib like it was the most natural thing in the world. He smiled, not kindly, not playfully. It was the smirk of someone who thought he had power and liked it. His friends snickered behind him. I looked at the bib, then at my grandson, and something inside me went terribly quiet. They say aging makes you invisible. I didn't expect it to make me disposable. We were gathered in the dining room. Friday dinner. I'd been cooking since noon. Roast chicken with lemon and rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed with almonds, and the apple crumble he used to beg me for when he was little. My daughter Allison invited his friends over for a casual hangout, which really meant I'd cook and they'd eat, then vanish upstairs. The table was set. I wore my good cardigan, the cream one with the pearl buttons, and even pinned on the brooch Michael gave me on our 30th anniversary. It was my small way of still being someone. And then Justin handed me that bib. There was a beat of silence before one of the boys laughed. "That's harsh, man," he said, but didn't sound like he disapproved. I felt heat rise in my face. Not shame, something else, something firmer. It had bones. "You think I need that?" I asked him, my voice even. He shrugged. "You kinda slobber sometimes." I didn't. Not really. Maybe once or twice if I was tired. But I wasn't senile. I wasn't some doddering husk who needed a towel at the table. Allison didn't say a word. She just cleared her throat and walked back into the kitchen, letting her son handle the old lady. The silence stretched. The boys looked from me to Justin. He still held the bib, still smiling, still cocky. That's when I stood up. I took the bib from his hand, slowly, like I agreed. Like I accepted his judgment. "All right," I said. "Let's put it to good use." He blinked. "Wait, what?" I walked to my chair, pulled it back, and patted the cushion. "Sit." "Grandma, what?" "Sit," I said again, sharper. He hesitated. His friends laughed again, uncertain this time. Justin looked at them, then back at me. Maybe he thought I was losing it. Maybe he thought I was just going along with some joke. He sat. I tied the bib around his neck, one knot, two, tight. He squirmed. "Grandma!" But I was already heading to the kitchen. I opened the cabinet where Allison kept baby food for her clients' toddlers. She ran a daycare. Occasionally, I chose the banana puree. No additives, smooth texture, easy to swallow. I walked back with the jar and a spoon and placed both in front of him. "Open wide," I said. The room was frozen. His friends stared, mouths open. One of them let out a choked laugh and then quickly covered it. Justin looked like he didn't know whether to scream or disappear. "You think drooling's funny?" I asked quietly, spoon poised. "You think getting older makes someone less of a person?" "Grandma, I was joking." "You weren't," I said. "You meant it. You wanted them to laugh at me. Well, congratulations. But if you're going to treat someone like a baby, you'd better be ready to eat like one." He didn't open his mouth. So I placed the spoon down, picked up the jar, and set it firmly beside his plate. Then I sat back in my seat, folded my hands, and looked around the table. "Eat," I said to the others. "The food's getting cold." No one moved for a moment. Then one of the boys reached for the potatoes. Another passed the chicken. They avoided looking at Justin, who still sat there, red-faced and stiff, the bib tight around his neck. Allison returned, carrying the pitcher of iced tea. She froze when she saw the scene. Her eyes flicked from me to her son, then to the puree on the table. "What is this?" she whispered. Respect, I said, meeting her gaze. Or the lack of it. I thought maybe it needed to be served warm. She didn't respond, didn't defend him, didn't defend me either. Just stood there, blinking. I ate in silence. The food was good, if I may say so. I'd learned to cook from scratch before Allison was born. Back when Michael and I had nothing but one pan and a flickering stove. Back when food meant effort and love and dignity. Justin didn't touch the puree. He untied the bib halfway through the meal and left the table without a word. His friends muttered awkward goodbyes and followed him upstairs. I didn't call after them. Allison didn't either. After dinner, I washed the dishes, alone. And then I sat at the kitchen table, the bib folded neatly beside me. Not angry, not even sad, just done. Done being the background. Done being the punchline. Done letting silence cover disrespect like a tablecloth hides stains. And that's how it began. The house was unusually quiet after dinner. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, but something heavier, like the pause before a storm. I dried the last dish, stacked it carefully, and left the bib folded on the counter. It looked almost innocent now, as if it hadn't carried the weight of humiliation just an hour earlier. I could hear them upstairs, muffled voices, laughter forced, trying to drown out what had happened. I didn't mind. Let them pretend. Let them tell themselves it was nothing, just an old woman acting strange. I had spent years letting them explain me away. Tonight, for once, I didn't care to be explained. When Justin finally came down, his face was blotchy. He didn't look at me. He muttered something about going out with his friends and grabbed his jacket. His friends followed, their sneakers squeaking across the floor, their laughter brittle. The front door slammed. The house seemed to exhale. That's when Allison appeared. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, her face a mask of irritation. Not concern, not even confusion. Irritation. "What the hell was that, Mom?" she hissed. I didn't answer right away. I poured myself a cup of tea instead, letting the steam fog my glasses. The ritual steadied me. "Dinner," I said finally. "A lesson." "A lesson?" Her voice sharpened. "You embarrassed him in front of his friends. He's 17, for God's sake. Do you know what kind of damage that can do?" I set the teacup down with care. "I imagine less damage than telling your grandmother to wear a bib because she drools." She flinched, just slightly, but recovered quickly. He was joking. "Teenagers." "No," I interrupted. My voice was quiet, but it carried. "He wasn't joking. You heard the tone. You saw the look. You know as well as I do it wasn't a joke." For a moment, she had no words. Then, with a shrug that looked borrowed from her son, she said, "You could have just let it go." Let it go. That's what I'd been doing for years. Letting it go when she rolled her eyes at my suggestions. Letting it go when Justin ignored me at family gatherings. Letting it go when Allison treated my pension like part of her household budget, not mine. Every sigh, every dismissal, every silence. Let it go. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Not anymore." Her jaw tightened. "So what now? You're just going to make scenes? Humiliate him whenever you feel slighted?" "No," I said, standing. "I'm going to remind both of you that I'm not invisible, that I'm not here to bankroll your lives or to sit quietly in a corner while you decide how much dignity I get to keep." The air between us crackled. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth sat there, naked and undeniable. I carried my tea upstairs to my room. The door closed behind me with a soft click. My sanctuary. My prison. Both at once. I sat at my desk and opened the top drawer. Inside were neat stacks of receipts, bank statements, notes, the evidence of a lifetime of giving. The new car Allison bought for safety. The tuition payments for Justin's private school. The mortgage help just until she got back on her feet. Thousands upon thousands, siphoned quietly, as if my worth could be measured in dollars. I pulled one slip free. A check stub from last year, written to cover a temporary shortfall that somehow never got repaid. My handwriting looked steady, hopeful. I almost didn't recognize it. How many times had I told myself it was the right thing to do? That mothers give? That grandmothers sacrifice? That if I just gave a little more, I'd buy my place in their lives? I closed the drawer. No more. The clock ticked past 10. I turned off the light and lay in bed, listening to the house settle. Every creak, every sigh of the pipe sounded different tonight, as if the walls themselves sensed a change. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading tomorrow, because tomorrow I would begin untangling myself from them, not out of anger, out of necessity, out of self-respect. They thought tonight had been the scene, the humiliation, the end of it. But tonight had only been the beginning. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning, long before Allison stirred. The sun was barely pushing through the curtains, painting the room in pale streaks. My joints ached the way they always did, but it didn't matter. There was something inside me that felt alert, steady. I dressed slowly, choosing a navy skirt and a pressed blouse. I hadn't dressed with care in a long time, not for myself at least. Most mornings, I just pulled on whatever was nearest. Comfortable, unremarkable. But today, I wanted to feel deliberate. Downstairs, the kitchen still carried the scent of last night's chicken. The bib was gone from the counter. Allison must have hidden it away, embarrassed by the evidence. The dishes were washed, the table cleared, everything in its place, as though nothing had happened. That was their way. Tidy up the surface, shove the mess into shadows, pretend life was seamless. But life wasn't seamless. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table. My hands rested on the wood, fingers spread wide. They were old hands, veined, freckled, marked by years of sewing, cleaning, writing checks. Hands that had made life smoother for everyone else. The silence broke when Allison came down. Her hair was hastily pulled into a bun, her face bare of makeup. She didn't look at me when she opened the fridge. "Morning," she said flatly. "Morning." The coffee pot gurgled between us. She poured herself a cup, leaned against the counter, and finally turned her eyes on me. "Justin's not going to school today. He's humiliated. He says he can't face anyone." I sipped my coffee. "He'll live." Her jaw clenched. "Do you even care what this does to him? He's a teenager, Mom. They're fragile." I set my cup down. Fragile is not an excuse for cruelty. The words hung there. Her mouth opened, then shut again. She looked away, staring at the tiled floor as though it might offer her an escape. I stood. "I'll be out for most of the day." "Where are you going?" "To see about my money." Her head snapped toward me. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." Her face flushed. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You don't understand finances. I handle it so you don't have to worry. It's easier that way." Easier for whom? I thought, but I didn't say it. I just picked up my bag, slipped on my coat, and walked out the door. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up even when you're already awake. I walked slowly down the sidewalk, each step measured, steady. The bank wasn't far, a 10-minute walk. I had been inside it dozens of times, but always with Allison beside me, doing the talking, signing where she told me. The tellers knew her name better than mine. Today, I would walk in alone. The glass doors slid open with a quiet hum. The air inside smelled faintly of polished wood and printer ink. People moved in and out, briskly, purposeful. I approached the reception desk. "Good morning," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "I need to speak to someone about my accounts." The young man behind the desk smiled politely. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "No, but I'll wait." He nodded and gestured to the chairs. "Someone will be with you shortly." I sat, smoothing my skirt. My heart thudded, not from fear, but from anticipation. After so many years of letting others decide for me, I was about to take back something small but crucial. After 10 minutes, a woman in a navy suit approached. She was middle-aged, with neat hair and kind eyes. "Mrs. Edwards? I'm Karen. Why don't you come with me?" I followed her into an office lined with filing cabinets and certificates. She gestured to a chair. "What can I help you with today?" she asked. I folded my hands in my lap. "I want to see every automatic payment leaving my account, every transfer, every authorization." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course. Do you have a specific concern?" "Yes," I said simply. "I believe I've been too generous for too long, and I'd like to see the proof." Karen typed into her computer. Pages of numbers spilled out from the printer. She slid the stack toward me. "These are your recurring payments for the last 12 months." I looked at them. Line after line after line. Mortgage, car insurance, school fees, utilities, gym memberships, even a landscaping service I didn't recognize. Hundreds of payments, thousands of dollars, all leaving quietly, month after month, while I was told not to worry. I pressed my palm flat against the paper. My hand trembled, but my voice did not. "I want them stopped," I said. "All of them." Karen hesitated. "All?" "Yes, every single one. And I want to revoke any power of attorney connected to my account, effective immediately." She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I'll prepare the forms." I exhaled, long and steady, as though something heavy had shifted inside me. For the first time in years, the money was mine again. And with it, so was a part of myself. Karen slid the papers across the desk, her pen resting neatly on top. "Take your time, Mrs. Edwards. Read carefully before you sign." I adjusted my glasses and leaned in. The text swam at first. Formal, dense, deliberately complicated. Legal words had a way of disguising their meaning, but I forced myself to slow down, to take each line as it was. Revocation of power of attorney. Termination of automatic transfers. Confirmation of sole account holder authority. Each phrase was like a breath of air, clearing away years of fog. I initialed here, signed there, turned the page. Karen watched without hurry, her expression professional but not cold. She'd probably seen it before. Someone realizing too late that they'd surrendered too much. When I slid the papers back, my hand no longer trembled. "Everything will be processed today," Karen said. "By the end of the week, no further transfers will occur without your authorization." I nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "If you don't mind me asking, did someone misuse your accounts?" I met her eyes. "Not misuse. Just assume ownership of what was never theirs." Understanding flickered in her face. She didn't press. Instead, she rose and shook my hand. Her grip was firm, respectful. "If you need assistance setting up protections, automatic alerts, spending limits, let me know. We can make sure this doesn't happen again. I'll consider it, I said. Outside, the daylight was brighter, sharper. The chill air carried a current that felt almost new. My steps home were lighter than they had been in years, though I carried nothing but my bag and the weight of decision. When I opened the front door, Allison was in the living room, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice carried, sharp and insistent. I don't know what's going on, but the card was declined. Try again. Yes, the joint account. Well, it should work. Her eyes snapped to me as I walked past. I didn't pause. I didn't explain. I simply hung my coat and headed for the kitchen. The kettle was waiting, the tea bags stacked neatly in their tin. Mom, she said, following. What did you do? I filled the kettle, set it on the stove. The whistle would answer for me soon enough. She raised her voice. Mom, did you cancel something? The mortgage payment bounced. Justin's tuition payment, too. What are you thinking? I turned slowly, hands steady. I'm thinking it's time I stopped paying for lives that aren't mine. Her face went pale, then blotched red. You can't just cut us off. We depend on you. There it was. The truth. Naked and raw. Not love. Not care. Dependence. You're grown, Allison, I said softly. You and your son. You've got jobs, resources, skills. You don't need me to prop you up anymore. You don't understand how hard it is, she snapped. You've never had to raise a teenager alone. I inhaled slowly. Do you forget? I raised you alone after your father left. And I managed without anyone handing me blank checks. That silenced her, for a moment at least. She shook her head, muttering, This isn't fair. Not after everything we've built together. Built. The word stung because it implied partnership. Yet what she called building had always been me giving, her taking. The kettle whistled. I turned back to it, poured the hot water into my cup, and sat at the table. Allison lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, fury and fear fighting on her face. What am I supposed to tell Justin? She demanded. I stirred my tea. Tell him the truth. Tell him Grandma's money isn't endless. Tell him respect is worth more than a tuition check. Her lips tightened. He won't understand. Then perhaps it's time he learns. She left the room with a huff, the sound of her footsteps hard against the floorboards. A door slammed upstairs. The house grew quiet again. I sat with my tea, feeling the calm settle into me. Not triumphant, not yet, but firm. I looked toward the mantel where Michael's photograph stood, smiling in that gentle way he always had. You'd be proud of me, I whispered. For once I wasn't just surviving the day. I was shaping it. And tomorrow I would take the next step. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because of regret. There was none. But because my mind kept circling the same thought. If I'd waited this long to take back control, what else had I left neglected? At dawn, I rose and dressed again with care. The house was silent. Allison must have been asleep still, and Justin's door was closed. I moved quietly down the stairs, gathered the neat folder of documents from my desk, and slipped it into my bag. When I arrived at the bank later that morning, Karen was waiting. She greeted me warmly, ushering me into her office again. I've processed the revocations you signed yesterday, she said, handing me a printout. Every recurring transfer has been suspended. Nothing will move out of your accounts unless you personally authorize it. I studied the paper. Rows of canceled payments stared back at me. Tuition, mortgage, utilities, insurance. The life of another household that had been financed on my back. It was dizzying. I'd also recommend, Karen continued gently, that you consider appointing a trusted advisor for future protections. Someone other than family, given the circumstances. I nodded. A lawyer. I've worked with one before. I'll call him. Her approving smile reminded me of a teacher pleased with a student's progress. Good. In the meantime, we'll set up an alert system. Anytime money leaves your account, you'll receive a notification. No one will move funds without your knowledge. The printer spat out more papers. I signed them all, one after another, steady and sure. Each stroke of the pen felt like cutting a cord that had bound me for too long. When I left the bank, the air seemed fresher, though it was the same cold March morning as always. I breathed deeply, as if the act itself could cleanse years of quiet suffocation. I walked slowly home, past tidy houses with their trimmed lawns and children's bicycles leaning against fences. Normal life unfolded on every porch and sidewalk. Neighbors waving, dogs barking, kids tugging backpacks. I thought of how long I had allowed myself to be tucked away, useful only as a purse, tolerated but never cherished. When I opened the front door, Allison was waiting. She was pacing the living room, phone in her hand. The look on her face was half panic, half rage. "Mom," she said, her voice sharp. "The bank called me. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I replied calmly, setting my bag on the table. "I've done exactly what needed doing." She stared. "Justin's tuition is unpaid. The mortgage is overdue. Insurance is about to lapse. You're going to ruin everything." "Everything?" I repeated softly. "Or just the arrangement where I carry you on my back?" Her cheeks flushed. "That's not fair. We needed your help." "And I gave it," I said. "For years. Every check, every payment, every temporary loan. I gave until there was nothing left of me but the giving." She shook her head, as though my words were absurd. "You don't understand. You're old. You don't know what things cost anymore." I felt a strange calm. I know exactly what they cost, because I've paid every bill. The silence that followed was heavy. For once, she had no quick answer, no justification. I walked past her into the kitchen, put on the kettle, and began the simple ritual of tea. My hands were steady as I laid out the cup, the saucer, the spoon. Allison followed, her voice tight. "What am I supposed to do now?" I looked at her over my shoulder. "Stand on your own feet." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She left the room without another word. I stirred my tea, listening to the quiet of the house. Not an empty quiet, but a clean one. When the phone rang later, it was a number I hadn't seen in years, the lawyer's office. I had left a message that morning, and now his secretary confirmed an appointment for the next day. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." After I hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. For so long, my life had shrunk to the size of this house. The chores, the checks, the silence. Now, with every signature, every step, the walls were moving back, and I was stepping into space I hadn't claimed in decades. I wasn't free yet, but I was on my way, and freedom, once tasted, is impossible to forget. Back in my room that evening, I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. It smelled faintly of lavender, the sachets I used to tuck inside decades ago. Everything I'd kept was there. Photographs, letters, scraps of fabric, a box of buttons that had belonged to my mother. On top, under a folded quilt, lay my sewing machine. Heavy, solid, the kind built to last. I hadn't touched it in years. My fingers brushed over the metal, remembering the rhythm of its needle, the steady hum that had been the soundtrack of my evenings for so long. That machine had built my independence once. After Michael left, I sewed dresses, shirts, anything neighbors asked for. Every hem stitched was money for food, for Allison's school shoes, for bills that didn't pay themselves. My hands had earned our survival. And yet, here I was, treated like I'd never done enough, like I was nothing but a mouth at the table, an old woman who drooled. I pulled out a photo from the bottom of the chest. Allison at 12, wearing a green dress I'd sewn the night before her recital. She'd beamed at me on stage, twirling with pride. I remembered her hug afterward, breathless, saying, "You're the best mom in the world." Where had that girl gone? I set the picture aside and lifted another. Me and Michael, smiling on a beach, wind whipping our hair. For a moment, I let myself imagine him still here, sitting across from me, his laugh filling the room. He would have hated the way things had turned. He would have told me to draw the line long ago. The sound of Justin's laughter floated up from downstairs, sharp and careless. I froze, listening. He was on the phone with someone, probably retelling last night's scene. I could almost hear the tone, dismissive, mocking. My grandma lost it at dinner. I closed the chest and sat on the bed, pressing my palms together until they ached. I would not cry. I had cried enough for a lifetime. Instead, I rose, went to the desk, and began sorting through the drawer stuffed with receipts and papers. Each slip of paper told the same story. Sacrifice. A down payment on Allison's car. Justin's school trip. Utility bills. Covered just this once. I laid them in neat piles across the desk. The desk groaned under the weight of years. And then I saw it. A thank you card, scrawled in Justin's messy handwriting from when he was 8. Thank you, Grandma, for always taking care of me. I love you. I traced the letters with my finger. He had meant it then. Children always mean it before they're taught not to. The ache in my chest was different this time. Not despair. Something closer to mourning. Mourning what had been lost, what might never come back. But beneath it, a steady pulse of resolve. I slid the receipts back into their folder, snapped it shut, and set it on the bed. Tomorrow I would take it to the lawyer. Proof of every check, every payment, every unspoken expectation. Not because I needed reimbursement, but because the record mattered. My story mattered. When I turned out the light, the house was hushed again. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking of how silence can cut sharper than words. They thought I was weak, that I would absorb it all, just as I always had. But they had mistaken silence for surrender, and I was finished surrendering. The phone rang just after breakfast. Allison's voice came before I even said hello, sharp and brittle. "Mom, what are you trying to do to us?" I set the receiver between my shoulder and ear, buttering my toast. "Good morning to you, too." "This isn't funny," she snapped. "The mortgage payment bounced again. Justin's school called about tuition. Do you want us thrown out of the house? Do you want your grandson expelled?" I took a bite of toast, chewed, swallowed. "I want my dignity back." There was silence on the line, a silence so full I could almost hear her frown. "You're being unreasonable," she said finally. "This isn't about dignity. It's about survival. You've always helped us. Why change now?" "Because," I said evenly, "help turned into expectation. Expectation turned into entitlement, and entitlement turned into disrespect." Her breath hissed down the line. "You're overreacting to one stupid joke Justin made." "No." My voice was firm now. That bib wasn't the first insult. It was just the first one I refused to swallow. She started again, voice rising, piling excuses. Teenagers are cruel without meaning it. Stress makes people snap. I didn't understand modern parenting, on and on. I listened, waiting for her words to lose their edge until they tumbled into pleading. Mom, please. We need you. I can't do this without you. Justin can't either. I closed my eyes. For years, those words had been a hook in my chest. We need you. They had kept me pouring money, time, and silence into a well that never filled. But I saw them now for what they were. Chains. You'll manage, I said softly. You've managed plenty of things when you wanted to. She grew desperate. You're going to ruin us? Don't you care about your own family? I gripped the receiver. My hand shook, but my voice stayed steady. Family isn't built on exploitation, Allison. It's built on love, respect. I've given both, and in return, I got bills and a bib at dinner. Her gasp crackled through the line. I waited. She didn't answer. I'm seeing a lawyer today, I continued. From now on, my finances are mine alone. If you and Justin need help, you'll have to learn to stand on your own feet, just like I did when I raised you. Her voice came low, almost a growl. You'll regret this. I already regret waiting so long. I hung up before she could reply. My hand trembled on the receiver, but I didn't lift it again. The silence after was heavy, but not crushing. It was a silence I chose. I stood at the window, watching the street outside. Neighbors bustled, cars pulled in and out of driveways. Normal life ticked on, indifferent to whether I gave or withheld. For the first time, I felt part of that life again, not hidden, not erased. Simply present. Later, when I gathered my folder of receipts and put on my coat, I glanced once more at Michael's photograph. His smile steadied me. Wish me luck, I murmured. And I walked out the door, head high, not as someone's purse, not as someone's fool, but as myself. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of dust and polished wood. The brass plate on the door still read Howard and Miles, the same firm Michael and I had used for our will decades ago. I remembered sitting in this very waiting room, Allison, still in pigtails, swinging her legs on the chair. Back then, I'd thought the future was secure because we'd planned it together. Now, I was here alone, clutching a folder thick with receipts, years of sacrifice pressed into paper. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile. Mrs. Edwards, Mr. Miles will see you now. I followed her down a hall lined with diplomas and photographs, lawyers shaking hands, ribbon cuttings, civic awards. The office we entered was warm, with shelves crowded by leather-bound volumes and a large desk where a gray-haired man rose to greet me. Mrs. Edwards, he said, extending his hand. It's been a long time. I shook it firmly. Too long. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. Of course. Please sit. I lowered myself into the leather chair, my folder balanced on my lap. My hands didn't tremble, though the weight of what I carried could have made them. He folded his fingers on the desk. Tell me what brings you here. I opened the folder, spreading receipts across the polished wood. This, I said. Years of covering bills that weren't mine. Car payments, school tuition, mortgages, grocery cards, insurance, even landscaping services for a house that isn't mine. All withdrawn from my accounts. His brows rose slightly as he scanned the papers. And these were authorized? By my daughter, I said. She's had power of attorney. I signed it when I thought it was temporary so she could help with banking after my surgery. That was years ago. Since then, she's treated my money like her own. He nodded slowly. And you've revoked that authority now? Yes, yesterday at the bank. No more automatic transfers either. I want it all legally sealed. No loopholes. Good. He tapped the papers. We can draft a new financial power of attorney, one limited strictly to your choice of representative, not family. And I recommend establishing a living trust. That way, your assets are protected, managed exactly as you specify. I breathed out, long and steady. Yes, that's what I want. No surprises, no manipulations. I've spent too long paying for respect I never received. He adjusted his glasses. May I ask, what changed? After so many years? I looked him in the eye. My grandson handed me an adult bib at dinner, told me to wear it because I drool. That was the moment. For a second, the lawyer's face betrayed shock, then settled back into professional calm. I see. I'm not here for revenge, I added. I'm here for dignity, for boundaries. He nodded firmly. Then we'll make sure of it. The law can't change hearts, but it can draw lines no one can cross. We spent the next hour going through options. He explained trusts, wills, contingent beneficiaries. I listened carefully, asked questions, made notes. It felt good. Not overwhelming, not confusing. Just business. My business. At the end, he slid a stack of preliminary documents toward me. Read these. We'll meet again next week to finalize. In the meantime, I'll draft a letter revoking any authority your daughter might still claim. She'll have no legal access to your finances. I placed my signature where he indicated. My handwriting was clear, steady, not the scrawl of a frail woman, but the mark of someone certain. When I left, the afternoon sun was slanting low, painting the street in gold. I paused on the steps outside, folder tucked under my arm. The city moved around me. People rushing, talking, carrying groceries, waiting for buses. I blended in, just another figure on the sidewalk. But inside, I felt taller, lighter. For the first time in decades, my life was in my own hands again, and no one, not daughter, not grandson, not their laughter at a dinner table, would take it from me. The next morning, I woke with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The lawyer's words still echoed in me. The law can't change hearts, but it can draw lines no one can cross. I'd drawn the first line. Now it was time to draw others. On my dresser sat a photograph in a chipped silver frame. It showed me with a woman about my age, both of us laughing, hair whipped by the wind at a picnic. Her name was Ruth. We had been inseparable once, neighbors who turned into sisters. We sewed together, cooked side by side, raised our children in tandem. For decades, if I wasn't in my own kitchen, I was in hers. Until Allison and Ruth had an argument. Something petty that grew sharp. Words about child rearing, about choices. Allison had been furious with her, and I, wanting to keep peace at home, had drifted away from Ruth. We hadn't spoken in 15 years. I traced the photo's edge with my thumb. So much had been lost. Not only money, not only dignity, friendship too. I dressed, put on my coat, and walked 3 streets over. Her house looked the same, though the garden was more overgrown, the paint peeling. I hesitated at the gate, suddenly shy. What if she shut the door in my face? What if she didn't even remember me? But I hadn't come this far to retreat. I lifted the latch and walked up the path. When she opened the door, she looked older, of course. Her hair was white now, cropped short. Her back stooped slightly, but her eyes, sharp, blue, curious, were the same. For a moment, we only stared. "Ruth," I said softly. Her mouth parted. "May?" I nodded. "Yes, it's me." She blinked hard, then stepped aside. Well, don't just stand there. Come in. The living room smelled faintly of lavender polish. The same floral curtains hung at the windows. We sat across from each other, tea between us, silence heavy, but not hostile. Finally, I said, I should have come years ago. I let Allison's anger become mine, and I lost one of the best friends I ever had. Her eyes glistened, though her voice stayed firm. I missed you. The words struck deep, simple, true. I missed you too, I admitted. We talked for hours as if time had folded, about husbands gone, children grown, aches that came with mornings, about how lonely the days could feel when you stopped being useful in other people's eyes. When I told her about the bib, she slapped her hand on the table. The nerve! If my grandson ever did that, I'd send him packing. I laughed. Real laughter, the kind that shakes the chest. I did something close enough. And I told her how I'd tied it around Justin's neck and set puree in front of him. She wheezed with laughter until tears rolled down her cheeks. Good for you. About time you reminded them who raised them. The warmth in her reaction filled a hollow space inside me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I was simply standing up again. Before I left, she touched my hand. You know, May, there's a group that meets at the community center. Women like us. Widows, grandmothers, a few just lonely. They share stories, play cards, sometimes just drink tea. Come with me next week. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to retreat to the safety of my quiet house, but another part, the part that remembered joy, remembered being more than a background figure, stirred. Yes, I said finally. I'll come. When I walked home, the air felt lighter. The houses looked less like cages and more like markers along a road I was choosing for myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't just cutting ties. I was tying new ones. The community center sat on the edge of town, a low brick building with big glass doors and a faded sign that read, Willow Hall. I hadn't been inside in years, not since Allison was in grade school, and I used to take her to piano lessons here. Walking through those doors again, I felt something tug in my chest, a memory of a time when life still stretched ahead, not behind. Ruth met me at the entrance, her cane tapping the tiles. You came, she said, eyes twinkling. I said I would, I replied, though part of me still wanted to bolt. She led me down the hall, where voices and laughter spilled out of a room at the end. Inside, half a dozen women sat around a long table. Cups of tea and plates of biscuits cluttered the surface. The smell of coffee mingled with the faint scent of perfume. This is May, Ruth announced, her hand on my arm. An old friend. They greeted me warmly with nods and smiles. One woman, tall with silver hair piled high, patted the chair beside her. Come sit. We were just about to start cards, but stories first. I sat cautiously, folding my hands in my lap. The stories began. One woman spoke of her son who rarely called except when bills piled up. Another described her daughter-in-law's barbed comments about her slowing down. Each tale carried the same rhythm. Love strained thin by entitlement. Respect eroded by convenience. I listened, heart pounding. Every word felt like an echo of my own life. When they laughed, not cruelly, but with the weary humor of survival, I laughed too. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone in the ache. When it came my turn, I hesitated. Then I said, my grandson handed me a bib at dinner, told me I'd drool in front of his friends. Gasps and mutters filled the room. One woman actually slapped the table. The nerve. I smiled faintly. So I tied it on him instead, sat him in my chair, served him puree. The room erupted, laughter, clapping, even cheers. "That's right," someone said. "Good for you." I laughed with them, really laughed, the sound startling me. It felt like something breaking open inside, something I hadn't let out in years. Ruth nudged me. "See? You belong here?" Cards came out then, worn decks shuffled with practiced ease. They played rummy, trading jokes and gentle barbs. I joined in, rusty but eager. When I won my first hand, they applauded as though I'd conquered a mountain. Between games, talk drifted to plans. A trip to the farmer's market, a knitting circle, a lecture at the library. Small things, but threaded with joy. These women weren't waiting to be invited into someone else's life. They were building their own. When the afternoon wound down, I found myself reluctant to leave. Ruth walked me to the door, her arm linked with mine. "Well?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "I feel lighter." She smiled. "That's what happens when you're seen again." The words struck deep. Seen. I hadn't realized how starved I was for it until now. On the walk home, I thought of Allison and Justin, of how invisible I had become in their house, how easily they dismissed me. And then I thought of the women in that room, their eyes meeting mine, their laughter weaving me back into the fabric of belonging. For years, I had let others dictate my worth. Now, sitting at a table of women who had weathered the same storms, I felt something return. Not youth. Not illusion, but dignity. And once dignity comes back, it doesn't slip away quietly. It was a Sunday evening when Justin finally came to me. I was in the garden, trimming the last of the dead stems from the roses, when I heard the sliding door open behind me. His footsteps were hesitant, not the usual stomping thuds of a teenager. "Grandma?" His voice cracked on the word. I straightened slowly, brushing soil from my gloves. He stood there, hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes flicking everywhere but at me. For once, he looked less like a cocky boy and more like the child I used to tuck into bed. He kicked at the ground. "I wanted to say sorry. For, the bib thing." I pulled the gloves off, folded them neatly, and laid them on the bench. "You wanted to humiliate me, and you succeeded." His face flushed. "I didn't mean it like that. It was just a joke." I studied him, the slope of his shoulders, the nervous twitch in his hands. "Justin, jokes are meant to make people laugh together. What you did was meant to make people laugh at me. There's a difference." He opened his mouth, shut it again. "I didn't think it'd hurt you that bad." I sighed, sitting on the bench. "That's the problem. You didn't think about me at all." The silence between us stretched. I could hear the faint hum of traffic, a dog barking down the street. He shuffled his sneakers in the dirt, restless. Finally, he muttered, "Mom says you're being dramatic, that you're making everything harder than it has to be." I almost laughed, not at him, but at how predictable Allison was. Instead, I shook my head. "Of course she does. It's easier to call someone dramatic than to admit you've relied on them too much." He frowned. "You've always helped us. Isn't that what family's for?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Family helps, but family also respects. I've given help without respect for too long." His eyes darted to mine then, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty instead of arrogance. "So, you don't want to help us anymore?" I reached out, touched his hand. "I will always love you. That never changes. But love doesn't mean obedience. Love doesn't mean letting you treat me like less than a person." He swallowed hard. His fingers twitched under mine, as though he wanted to pull away but couldn't quite do it. "I didn't think about it like that," he said softly. "No," I agreed. "You didn't. But maybe now you will." The porch light flicked on behind us, and Allison's voice called from inside, sharp, impatient. "Justin, we're leaving in 5 minutes." He jerked his hand back, stuffing it into his pocket again. "I gotta go." I nodded. "Go on." He lingered a moment, then mumbled, "See you later," before disappearing into the house. I sat alone in the twilight, the air cooling, the roses shivering in the breeze. My chest felt heavy, but not with despair. With clarity. He wasn't ready to understand yet. Maybe he never would. But for once, I had spoken truth aloud, not swallowed it. And that mattered more than his apology. The letter came folded neatly in an envelope with the town seal on it. Allison had dropped the mail on the counter without a word, her lips pressed tight, her eyes avoiding mine. I sorted through the pile slowly until I found the one addressed to me. Department of Senior Services. Inside was a flyer, glossy but plain, with a headline in bold, "Independent Living Apartments Available." Below it were pictures of modest one-bedroom units, small kitchens, shared gardens. Nothing luxurious, nothing excessive, but clean, private, mine. I ran my finger over the photograph of a little balcony with 2 chairs. I could almost see myself sitting there with morning tea, the day stretching ahead without anyone barking orders or reaching for my purse. The next morning, I made an appointment. The social worker's office was tucked behind the library. Her name was Claire, a brisk woman in her 40s, with kind eyes that softened the sharpness of her voice. She gestured for me to sit across from her desk. "So, Mrs. Edwards," she said, flipping open a notebook. "Tell me why you're interested in applying." I folded my hands in my lap. "Because I've spent too long living where my presence is tolerated, but not respected. I want a space that's mine. Just mine." She studied me a moment, then nodded. "You're not the first to say that. These apartments are designed exactly for that purpose. Independence with support nearby if you need it. No one controls your money. No one dictates your schedule. It's your home." The words landed like a balm. Your home. "What's the process?" I asked. She slid a packet of forms across the desk. Application, proof of income, medical clearance. There's a waiting list, but we prioritize applicants who are currently in unstable or unhealthy living environments. Unstable. Unhealthy. The words were clinical, but they fit. I pulled the folder from my bag, the one I'd been carrying since the lawyer's office, and placed my bank statements on the desk. Financially, I'm stable on my own. Emotionally, not so much. This house I live in now, it's not home anymore. Claire looked at me, her pen paused. "What happened?" I hesitated, then answered plainly. "My grandson humiliated me. My daughter enables him, and I realized I've been financing both their lives at the expense of my own." Her eyes softened further. "Then you're exactly the kind of applicant we want to help." I filled out the forms slowly, carefully, writing each answer in my neatest hand. Birth date, social security, income, emergency contact. For that line, I paused. For years it had been Allison. I left it blank for now. When I signed the last page, Claire took the stack and smiled. "We'll be in touch soon, but start thinking of what you'd like to bring with you. These units are small. Only what matters most should come along." On the walk home, I turned that thought over in my mind. Only what matters most, not everything, not everyone. That evening, Allison confronted me in the kitchen, arms folded tight across her chest. "I heard you're applying to move out. Is that true?" "Yes," I said simply. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "So you're abandoning us? After everything?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I'm saving myself. There's a difference." She scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and stormed off. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the table, staring at the photograph of the little balcony again. For the first time, the future didn't feel like something shrinking. It felt like a door opening. When the letter arrived with the approval, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. "Congratulations, Mrs. Edwards. A unit has become available at Willow Grove Independent Living. Move-in date, April 15th. I read the words 3 times, letting them sink in. A date, a key, a place that would be mine. That evening, I went upstairs to my room and opened the cedar chest again. The lavender sachets had grown faint, but the scent was still there, clinging to the quilt and folded linens. I pulled them out carefully, setting aside what I would take. The quilt my mother stitched, the photograph of Michael at the beach, my sewing machine. The rest could stay. Sorting was easier than I expected. When you spend years in a house that isn't truly yours, you learn to let go of objects. They never carried my name anyway. The heavy china set Allison insisted on buying with my money, the sleek gadgets crowding the kitchen counters. None of that mattered. What mattered fit neatly into 3 boxes: clothes, memories, and tools for the hands that had always saved me. As I folded sweaters into the first box, Justin appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, trying for his usual smirk, but not quite landing it. "So it's true," he muttered. "You're moving out." "Yes," I said, without looking up. He shuffled his feet. "Mom says you're being selfish." I laid a sweater flat, smoothed its edges. "Then let her think that." He hesitated. "So you're just leaving us?" I turned to face him. "Justin, I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving the version of me you think you can laugh at, use up, and ignore. That woman is finished." His face reddened. He muttered something. Maybe an insult, maybe just air, and stalked off down the hall. I let him go. Later that night, Allison confronted me. She stood in the doorway, her silhouette sharp against the hall light. "You can't do this," she said flatly. "I already have." Her fists clenched at her sides. "Who's going to help us now? Who's going to pay when something breaks? When Justin needs something?" I looked at her steadily. "You are. That's what parents do." Her mouth twisted as if I'd slapped her. "You're cruel." "No," I said softly. "I'm finally kind. To myself." She left without another word. The days that followed were a quiet whirlwind. I packed in the mornings, visited Ruth in the afternoons, and signed final documents at the lawyer's office. Each step felt like pulling another root out of the soil, freeing myself from ground that had long since dried around me. On my last night in the house, I walked through the rooms slowly. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish, the kind I used to scrub in when Allison was a child. The kitchen counters gleamed with the gadgets I never touched. Upstairs, Justin's laughter echoed faintly from behind his door. Carefree, oblivious. I paused at my bedroom door, resting my hand on the frame. So many nights I'd lain awake here, listening to the quiet drip of disrespect, letting it soak into me. Now the walls seemed to sigh with relief, as if they too were ready to release me. I closed the door for the last time. The next morning, Ruth came with her neighbor's truck. Between the two of us, we loaded my 3 boxes, the sewing machine, and a single chair I'd claimed as mine. That was all. Allison stood on the porch, arms crossed, saying nothing. Justin hovered behind her, pretending disinterest. Neither offered to help. Neither said goodbye. I climbed into the passenger seat beside Ruth, my hands folded in my lap. The house loomed behind us, pale against the sky, a place I had kept alive with years of giving. As we drove away, I felt no ache, no tug of regret, only a lightness, fragile but real. For the first time in decades, I was going somewhere that didn't require permission, somewhere that didn't demand I shrink, somewhere I could breathe. The apartment was small, yes, but it was mine. When Ruth and I carried in the last of the boxes, I stood in the middle of the living room and just breathed. The space smelled faintly of fresh paint and clean wood floors, untouched by anyone else's demands. No voices rising, no footsteps pacing overhead. Just stillness. I set the quilt on the bed first, smoothing the fabric with both hands. My mother's stitches had held through decades, and now they held me too. Next came Michael's photograph. I placed it on the windowsill where the light could touch his smile. The sewing machine fit perfectly against one wall of the bedroom. I ran my hand along its frame, promising myself I'd use it again. Not for necessity this time, not to pay bills or cover debts, but because it made me feel capable. Ruth stayed long enough to help unpack the kitchen box. We arranged the cups, the plates, the kettle. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted. When we finished, she hugged me tightly. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded, unable to answer right away. My throat tightened, not with sadness, but with the strange fullness of starting over. After she left, I made tea and carried it out to the little balcony. 2 chairs waited there, plain but sturdy. I set my cup on the table and sat, watching the street below. Children rode bicycles in circles, their laughter lifting into the air. A dog barked at a passing truck. Somewhere, music drifted faintly from an open window. For the first time in years, I felt part of the world, not locked away in someone else's life. The first night was quiet. Too quiet almost. I woke once, expecting to hear Allison slamming a door or Justin's video games shaking the walls. Instead, there was only the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the building settling. I lay in bed, quilt pulled up to my chin, and let the quiet wash over me until it felt less like emptiness and more like peace. Over the next days, I fell into a rhythm. In the mornings, I made coffee and read by the balcony window. In the afternoons, I walked to the market, carrying home fresh bread and fruit. Some evenings, I joined Ruth and the other women at the community center. Cards, laughter, stories traded like currency. They welcomed me fully, and for the first time, I allowed myself to be welcomed. I even began sewing again. Not clothes, not yet, but small things. Cushion covers, a bag for groceries. The hum of the needle was a comfort, reminding me of all the ways I had built survival from scraps. But now, it wasn't survival. It was creation. One afternoon, while I was sewing, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the silence tugged at me. It was Allison. Her voice was tight, almost brittle. "So, this is it then? You've moved out? You've left us to figure it all out ourselves?" "Yes," I said simply. She scoffed. "Justin's furious. He says you abandoned him." I let out a slow breath. I didn't abandon him. I gave him a lesson. Whether he learns it is his choice. She was silent for a moment. Then, softer. "We're struggling. Without your help, things are hard." I closed my eyes, pressing the receiver gently to my ear. Then you'll grow strong. Hardship does that. I know, because I lived it. She muttered something, half anger, half confusion, and hung up. I set the phone down and returned to my sewing. My hands were steady, my stitches even. For the first time, her words didn't leave me hollow, because I was no longer in her house. I was in mine. That night, I sat on the balcony again, tea warm in my hands. The streetlights flickered on, casting pools of gold across the pavement. Life moved steadily below me, cars passing, voices rising and fading, and I thought, this is what freedom sounds like. The morning sun spilled across the quilt, warm and gentle. I lay there a while, not because my body was too heavy to rise, but because, for once, I had no one calling my name, no one needing money, no one waiting for me to step into a role I hadn't chosen. The silence was mine. The day was mine. I rose slowly, made coffee, and carried it out to the balcony. The little table wobbled slightly under the cup. The metal chair squeaked as I sat, but I didn't mind. These were not flaws. They were reminders. Nothing has to be perfect to belong to you. From up here, I could see children walking to school, backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. A man jogged past with his dog, both panting in rhythm. Across the street, an older woman watered her plants, waving when she noticed me. I waved back, smiling. I wasn't invisible anymore. Later that week, Ruth came by with a bag of scones. We ate them warm in my kitchen, butter melting across the crumbs. She told me about her daughter's new job, about the women's group planning a summer outing to the lake. I listened, I laughed, and when she left, the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt lived in. That evening, the phone rang again. Allison. Her voice was quieter this time, almost weary. Mom, I don't know how to do this without you. I held the receiver, steady. You'll learn. The way I did when I was younger than you are now. She didn't argue, only sighed. Justin's still angry. He's allowed to be, I said softly. Anger is easier than shame. He'll grow out of it, or he won't. That's his road to walk. She was silent for a long time. Finally, she whispered, I miss you. My throat tightened. Then come see me. Not for money, not for bills, just for tea. We hung up without promises, but the door was there, unlocked. It would be her choice to step through it. That night I sat again on the balcony. The street was quiet now, the hum of crickets rising in the warm air. I thought of the years I had lost to silence, to giving until there was nothing left of me but the giving. And I thought of the moment I'd tied that bib around Justin's neck. A small act, maybe, but the spark that lit everything after. They had mistaken my silence for surrender. They had mistaken my giving for weakness. But I am not weak. I am still here. Still standing. Still choosing. I don't regret the years I gave, but I will never again give at the expense of myself. That is the lesson. That is the freedom. And to every woman who has swallowed words she should have spoken, who has given until she has nearly vanished, who has let others decide her worth, hear me. You are not just someone's mother, not just someone's grandmother, not just a purse to be opened when others fall short. You are yourself. And that is enough. The world may try to make you smaller. Don't let it. Raise your voice. Take back your keys. Step into your own home, whether it's a room, an apartment, or simply the space you carve out in your own heart. Respect isn't given to those who wait silently. Respect is claimed by those who remember their worth. So if you are reading this, sitting in your own kitchen, wondering if it's too late, it isn't. It is never too late to choose yourself. I sip my tea, the night air cool against my face, and smile. Because I chose. And I am free.